This is Val from BowerBox Press with part 2 of the double needle stitch binding. So in this part I'll show you how to assemble and sew the double needle stitch binding. Again, this is the flexible structure. It opens really nicely. It's great for sketchbooks and for writing. So a couple things that you'll need for this. You're going to need 4 sewing needles that are large enough to fit your linen bookbinding thread and a curved needle. You'll need waxed linen thread. This is a 3-ply linen bookbinding thread. You can use others. Do wax it if it is not waxed already. Simply take a chunk of beeswax and run it over the thread a few times to deposit some wax on the thread. I have cut 4 lengths of this that are the length of my arms outstretched. Should be plenty to sew together my 8 signatures. You can do a little estimating to figure out how much you might need, but definitely you want to cut yourself some extra. If you run out in the middle, it's very frustrating. You'll need a bone folder and an awl, or just a really big needle. You'll need your paper for your insides and your covers. The first video shows you how to cut your covers, and I always base the size of my covers on the size of my paper. So I'll figure out my paper size first and then use it to measure for the covers. So I'm using 4 sheets of 70-pound text copy paper to make my interior pages. This is an 8.5 by 11 cut in half to give me 4¼ by 5½ final page size. So this is my unfolded sheet. I'm going to stack my 4 pages together for my signature and simply fold them in half with my bone folder. You'll do this for as many signatures as you have so that you'll have a stack of all your folded sheets. Now to measure for your cover, if you haven't made that yet, you'll want to line up the folded side with one edge of the bookboard and then create a margin on the top, the foredge, and the bottom of at least 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16 of an inch, depending on the size of your book, so that the bookboard overhangs on the 3 sides but is flush on the spine side. So check out the first video in this series to see how to create your covers. You'll want them to be completely covered and dry before you start the binding process. It's also helpful to have a punching cradle. If you don't, just do the best you can without it, but this will help you create your holes for your sewing stations. So I have 1 extra sheet of paper that I have marked out 4 holes spread out evenly over the spine. I generally leave about 3/4 of an inch at the top and bottom and then evenly distribute the holes in the middle. You will need to punch 4 holes in all of your signatures for this style of binding. Now this 1 piece of paper will be your template for all your signatures. So mark the holes first, and then your template will slide inside each of your signatures. Line up the top and the bottom so that everything is even, and then use your awl to punch straight down to get your 4 holes. Then remove the template. You have your 4 holes punched all the way through your signature, and repeat with your other signatures. So this is my stack of 8 final signatures. You want to see all of the holes perfectly lined up across. Make sure that the top is always the same, so don't flip a sheet over. Your holes may not line up. And just keep everything consistent. So punch holes in all of your folded signatures. Then you'll be ready to start sewing. So figure out which is your front cover and which is your back cover. I'm going to use this one as my front cover, so I'm going to set this one aside for right now and start with my back cover. I'm going to keep my signatures stacked up with all of the tops lined up, and this is the order that I'm going to pull from the stack. So this will just sit here waiting. This is going to be my back cover. So if I envision the book going together, the stack will sit on top like this. Now I'm first going to measure out holes for my back cover. I'm going to take my top signature and my awl. I'm going to slide the top signature onto my back cover that is the inside facing up. So this is the inside of my cover. I'm going to slide 1 signature on here. And instead of bringing it flush to the spine here, I'm going to leave a little over 1/4 of an inch And then I'm going to mark where these holes in my signature are with my awl. So I'm going to punch straight down through the cover a hole that lines up with each of those 4 holes in the signature. Put that signature back on top. And now I've got my holes started here. You're welcome to use a drill, or you can just use your awl to punch that hole all the way through the book board. So what I should end up with is 4 holes on what's going to be the spine side of my back cover. I'm going to go ahead and punch the holes in my front cover now, just so they're ready. So what I do is I take the front cover with the good side, the front side up, and the back cover with the back cover towards the front. So what I'm looking at right now is the inside of both of my covers. I'm going to line those up evenly, and then use these 4 holes as a guide to punch straight down onto my front cover. So this is the spine edge of my front cover here. And I'll continue punching those holes all the way through. Make sure you don't punch yourself in this step. Keep your fingers out of the way on the other side of the board. But now my holes are prepared in my front and my back cover. So what I should see, if this is the book, my front cover has holes on the left spine edge and my back cover has holes on the right spine edge here. So my front cover will be set aside. My back cover is now ready to attach the signatures to. I have my 4 pieces of linen bookbinding thread. And to attach them, I'm going to fold over one edge about 4 inches. This is going to be a tail that I'll work with later. I'm going to fold it in half, push this folded edge through the hole. You may need to widen your holes with your awl from the other side to get this thread through. So I'm pushing my folded thread through, opening this loop and drawing both tails through. So this is attaching the thread. I have one long tail that I'll be sewing with and one short tail that I'll be tying off with later. Repeat this with your 3 other threads. So again, I'm leaving a tail of about 4 inches. Folding it in half, poking that folded string through, and then pulling both tails through the loop. Now sewing with 4 threads at a time can be a little confusing, and if they're very long it can be a little distracting, especially if you have a cat that likes to help you sew, but it will get easier as you go along. So my last thread, folding it in half, and then pulling both tails through the loop. So what I should have first is 4 long tails and 4 short tails. Now these little short tails can get in the way. What I do sometimes is grab them all towards the outside of the book, kind of twist them together. If they're waxed, they should stay together. And I just twist them together so they're out of the way. They'll stay on the front of the book. So I'm just looking at the 4 threads that I'll be sewing with. Now each of these 4 threads, you want to thread 1 bookbinding needle onto it. And you don't want it completely doubled over, but pull the tail through long enough so that it's easy to sew with. So I'm going to pull a fairly long tail, makes it a little bit easier to sew with. And thread all 4 of your straight needles onto these 4 threads. Now when we're sewing, we're going to be working with pairs, so you can have 2 threads off to one side of your lap and 2 threads off to the other. These 2 threads will interact and these 2 threads will interact. Nothing will ever cross this middle section here, and this will make more sense as we start sewing. So I'm going to take my first signature from the top of my pile and just slide it straight down. It should line up with those 4 holes that we punched. So I'm going to take my leftmost thread and go into the signature from the outside in the leftmost hole, and then go over to the second hole and come back out towards me. So my thread has come in from the outermost, the left side hole, and come back out through the second hole. Now, the thread that's attached to the second hole on the board, that one is going to come in the hole you just came out of. So the second hole. And then it will cross over to the left and come out the leftmost hole. So you've taken these first 2 threads, they've come in and they've crossed over and then they've gone back out. So these 2 threads are always crisscrossing each other. Nothing is ever going to jump from the second hole to the third hole or vice versa. These 2 are always sewn as a pair. Now since this left side is done, I'll move over to the right side and start with my rightmost hole. The thread goes up and into the rightmost hole, and then over to the next one and back out. Now the thread that's attached to that second rightmost hole goes in and then crosses over to the rightmost hole. So again, these 2 threads interact and these 2 threads interact. Fold your signature back closed, and you want to tighten as you go along. So each pair, grab the threads and pull them out towards the top and bottom of the book snugly. You want to do this after every stitch to tighten everything up. It's pretty much impossible to go back and tighten it later, so make sure you tighten as you go along. So your first signature is now fully attached. You'll take your second signature, place it on top, and repeat the process the same way. So I'm going to start with my left needle. I'm going to go straight up to the leftmost hole and go down through the second hole. And now that just came out of the second hole, so the needle that's coming out of the second hole below comes straight up and into that hole that you just came out of, and over to the leftmost hole. So you're crisscrossing these 2 strings across each other on the inside of the signature. I'm going to pull that tight and move over to the right pair of holes. So I'll take my rightmost needle, jump up and into the rightmost hole, and over one hole and back out. Take the next needle up into the hole you just came out of, and bring it back over out the rightmost hole. So again, these 2 holes interact and these 2 holes interact. Nothing crosses the middle here or around the outside. Fold my signature down and then snug up both sides by pulling the threads out towards the top and bottom of my book. And you repeat this process with as many signatures as you have until they're all sewn together. So you're always taking the needle and going straight up into the next signature and then over one hole and bringing the other needle back along what you just sewed. So those 2 threads are always crisscrossing each other, and the other pair of threads is always crisscrossing each other. So you really are just thinking about the pairs of needles instead of all 4 at once. Push your signature down and then snug up every stitch. Don't pull too hard or you can rip your paper, but just gently tug on those threads to either side. Pull them straight out, don't pull them towards you. Pull them straight out will tighten up the stitches. And continue on to the next signature. So this book is going to have 8 signatures. You can do as many or as few as you'd like. Just keep in mind if you do more signatures, you will need even more threads. And you'll want to start with a long piece so you don't have to reattach a new thread in the middle of your sewing. Fold the signature down and snug up those stitches. Continue on. So repeat this process until you have all of your signatures attached, and then we'll be attaching the front cover and working a decorative row of stitches down the spine to finish off and tie off the back cover. So check back in part 3 of the video for attaching the front cover and doing the decorative spine stitch.